Welcome to Play Therapy Community Podcast, providing connection, information, and inspiration to child therapists all around the world. Here's your host, a licensed psychotherapist, a registered play therapist, and my mom, Jackie Flynn.
This episode is brought to you by EMDR and Play Therapy Integration Support. Are you an EMDR trained therapist that works with children and teens? I'd love to help you integrate play therapy techniques throughout all 8 phases so that your child and teen clients can fully experience the immense healing power of EMDR therapy. Visit JackieFlynnConsulting.com to check out my free webinars, EMDR approved courses, certification opportunities, case consultation options, individual and group, and much more. Children are not miniature adults, so working with them in a developmentally appropriate way can make a world of difference. Again, visit JackieFlynnConsulting.com. Hi there. Thank you so much for joining us in this episode of Play Therapy Community Podcast. Hi, I'm Jackie Flynn, and I'm really excited about this episode featuring Jocelyn Fitzgerald. Oh my goodness, you are going to love her. I found out about Jocelyn on Etsy of all places. I searched for some EMDR resources, and there she was. She had the most beautiful artwork. I downloaded a image, or I purchased an image, then downloaded it rather, on the window of tolerance. I was like, who is this? She had so many beautiful things. So I emailed her, and it turns out that she is also an EMDR consultant, and she is a licensed marriage and family therapist, and she's just a beautiful human being. And she also wrote it's just the sweetest book. It's called Colorful Place, Mindful Story and Art for Kids. She wrote it with Heather McClelland, and it is just illustrated so beautifully. She has this gift of art that can just touch your heart in a way that I don't think I've seen before. So at the time of this recording, it is almost time for the kids to go back to school. They go back to school next week. So I'm really curious how everything's going to go after this year of COVID and just to transition back into school. Typically, when kids go back to school, there are always a handful of kids that need some support during that time of adjustment, especially if they're going through a transition. But this year, I'm anticipating maybe a little bit more, as some kids haven't even been to school in over a year on the physical brick and mortar building. They've went online, many of them. So I'm really curious. Today I had the opportunity to speak at the pre-planning of one of the schools that I used to work in as a school counselor. I love that school. I'm on the board as a parent liaison, and that I looked out at all the teachers today while I was speaking. I was talking about the handy model of the brain and some ways to regulate and then co-regulate with the students. We were doing breath work, and it was just really neat to see all of those teachers gear up and just tackle a beautiful task of educating the kids. I think teaching is one of the most important, but it definitely can be one of the most difficult jobs out there. So it just really, my heart goes out to them, and I'm wishing them the best this year. Also, at the time of this recording, we're about 2 months out from the APT conference. So if you don't know what APT is yet, it's the Association for Play Therapy, and they are having an in-person conference, and I am so excited. A lot of the people that I know and I consider myself really good friends with, I haven't actually met in person. I've only met in trainings online, or maybe consultation groups, or social media connections, but I haven't seen them physically in person. So I'm just over the top excited to go to Arkansas. So if you're interested in that training, there's definitely some amazing speakers there. It is listed. You can register right on the Association for Play Therapy's website. I'm also gearing up for a training that I just created. Actually, I have three trainings kind of in the works right now. My one, the 8 phases of EMDR with children and adolescents, integrating play therapy techniques. I've taught that one several times now. I absolutely love it. It is a training that I feel like was just kind of born inside of me. It just came to me and I couldn't write fast enough. And I've had really good feedback on it. And I've literally taught people from around the world how to do EMDR with kids through the integration of play therapy. And it's incredible and it really works. So, in that training, we have fun. We blow bubbles and we play with toys and we do some virtual stuff because many of us were kind of thrown into that virtual setting. And it turns out it works really well online as well. And my new training that I have coming up is the practical application of the polyvagal theory. Oh, if you haven't heard about the polyvagal theory yet, definitely check it out. Go to Google and search Deb Dana. Or if you really want to get to the heart of it, get her book, The Polyvagal Theory in Therapy, and also Polyvagal Exercises for Safety and Connection. It's priceless. It's changed the way that I do my work. There's also Right to the Core, Dr. Stephen Porges. He is the creator of the polyvagal theory. And if you read his book, you get a really deeper understanding. I do love Deb Dana's work from the therapy perspective because she can really help us put into practical application and teach us not only about the theoretical kind of organizing principles and all that goes along with that, but also teaches us how to use it in therapy. Really, really good stuff. I literally use that knowledge and the practical application in every single session that I have with my clients. Okay, so I don't want to talk your ear off by any means. Let's just jump right into my conversation with Jocelyn Fitzgerald. Hi, Jocelyn. Thank you so much for being on our Play Therapy Community podcast. I recently found you in a search going through Etsy, and I was floored. I was like, wow, this is beautiful. You have so many
Oh,
cool things. And later on, you had some therapy worksheets. Later on, I realized that you're an EMDRI approved consultant, you're an art therapist, and now meeting you through this podcast recording, turns out you're a really cool person too, and you're an author.
oh,
So I'm excited to have you on the podcast and about what we're going to talk about today. But before we even get started, let me have you introduce yourself. Tell people who you are and what you do.
yeah. Well, thanks so much for having me. So I've been doing therapy now for about 15 years, and I am both an art therapist and an EMDR consultant, and I love to mix the two. And then I have all these little side things I do. Like I just created a book with a friend who's a behaviorist, and that's a mix of mindfulness and art. And then I also love my little Etsy shop, which I did not think it was going to take off like it has. And I've been creating art for my clients for years to kind of help as teaching tools. And my clients were really loving these images. And then I shared with a few therapist friends, and they were like, well, why don't you just put them on Etsy and see what happens? And lo and behold, people are really into it. So it just shows there's kind of a need for some new therapy tools, I think, in the EMDR community. Yeah.
Absolutely. When I found them, I was like, wow, who is this? How do I email her? I felt
Oh,
like an emergency.
oh, love that. Well, it made my day to get your email. So that was so
Oh,
fun.
made my day to even find you.
Oh,
So I got some of your therapy tools off of Etsy. I think you like window of tolerance, some really helpful things to share, emotional literacy. I think for any client, but especially, works great with the MDR therapy as well. But this book right here, The Colorful Place, Mindful Story and Art for Kids, I just got this in the mail. It's beautiful.
oh,
Real
thank you.
beautiful. Looks
Yeah, it
very
was a labor of love. It was definitely a fun project to do over the pandemic. For me, doing the art was such a treat. And then collaborating and seeing how kids related to it was just a really special experience.
Yeah. Oh, just hearing you say that, I like felt the almost like a warmth go through my body. I think about like where art can take us. And today on the podcast, we're going to talk about like art, bringing art into your practice and how that really supports the therapeutic process and helps with in integrating the brain. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's talk about incorporating art into our practice. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's a great tool. I mean, I know people that aren't art therapists might shy away from it, but I actually think you can add it even if you're not an art therapist. And I think everyone really benefits from creativity, even if it's just writing or if it's, scribbling. I think art therapists in general, we use that term art pretty loosely. So it can be really whatever the client is into or the therapist is into. And it's just so good for the brain. They're doing all this research now that's finding how art really creates calm within the body. They're doing biomarkers where they study the saliva and the cortisol levels. And after just 45 minutes of coloring, your cortisol levels come way down. So it's such a simple tool. And for some people, and I think this is what the book kind of was implying, that doing like a meditation of just being quiet and sitting with your thoughts and feelings can be kind of a hard first step towards mindfulness, but doing art and coloring can be a really nice bridge into that mindfulness, quieting, relaxing space.
Oh, yes. Oh, that's fascinating. So, coloring for just 45 minutes can bring down your cortisol levels.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
amazing, right?
incredible. And
Yeah,
I think about like even just the magnitude of being able to express yourself without words. Many of the clients that we deal with are children and adolescents, but I think it's not even just limited to children and adolescents, definitely across the lifespan. Sometimes we don't have words to express what's
right,
going
right,
on
right.
or
Yeah,
feel
so
comfortable talking about it.
exactly, exactly. So one thing I do with a lot of clients with trauma work is just expressing that experience with just line, shape, and color. So,
Mhm.
for example, recently I did an art piece around my anxiety around a particular situation. And then the next step is to, sit, look at it. And then the next step is to find a way to soothe it. So for me, it actually was, I took this piece of art that was anxiety and it was all this energy kind of exploding, and I was able to I tore it all up into tiny pieces and then I recreated it and I gave it all the space that it needed. And it just felt so good to have a different outlook, a different narrative around my personal anxiety experience. So I think this is something that any therapist can use. And line, shape, and color, you don't have to be a professional artist or put any value in it. It's just about the process of getting it out of you onto the page.
Okay, so this sounds so cool. Let's back up a little bit. So you like drew it, line, shape, and color. So I'm thinking about like colored pencils or something would work for that.
Yep.
Once you have it drawn, you torn it up and then you kind of gave it the space by kind of putting the pieces in a certain shape or whatever felt right to you, and then kind of felt that experience of giving it the space that it needed.
Yes,
Wow.
exactly. Yeah. I actually used oil pastels for this one. So I was like drawing and then I was smudging and pushing the colors all around. Yeah. And then I tore it up and then I glued it into a whole new formation. I gave it a sun. I was like, it needs some warmth and love. And then I scattered the pieces throughout this big piece of paper.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, that sounds so simple, but can really kind of take the processing and just transform what kind of felt solid and stuck and just like, okay, I don't know where to shift this into that kinesthetically moving that around
Yes. Yes.
without breaking the bank. It doesn't sound like it needs a
No.
lot of like material.
Right. Right. Yeah,
Wow.
another thing you can do with clients if you're not a professional art therapist is just scribble drawings. And scribbling is so therapeutic and it feels so good. And that's how we all learn how to draw when we're little. It's all just scribble. And then over time, we create forms and shapes. But I'll have clients that are maybe a little bit on the on the edge of not feeling comfortable, just to scribble for a few minutes. I have kind of like a ladder that keeps getting a bit harder. So first you scribble with your dominant hand, and then you can either just color in the shapes, which is super relaxing and usually creates a really beautiful composition.
Mhm.
Or you can see if you can see something within the scribbles, and then you pull it out for the therapist who's like the compassionate witness, for them to see. And usually that unconscious process brings about some information that's really interesting. So like for me, I did it not too long ago, and I found an octopus. And it went back to this memory I had with my mother-in-law where we were shopping, and I had this really sweet experience where we found a card that had a fun octopus on it. And I just was thinking about her and our relationship. Um, so that's the first level, is just the scribble with the dominant hand. And yeah, and then if you want to take it a little bit more, you can use the non-dominant hand. So for me, my left hand, and scribble there and see how that feels, to kind of let go of that control. And then if you're still comfortable, you can do a dominant hand with your eyes closed and just feel what it feels like to scribble with eyes closed. All of this creating that mindful awareness.
Mhm.
And then if you want to go even more where there's less control, you can do non-dominant hand with eyes closed. And then you can step back and even look at all four of these scribbles. And oftentimes people really like the one where there's the least amount of control the best. They really feel like, oh, just letting go of that felt really freeing. I can see more in it. There's more of me in that. And then it can be like this metaphor, like art is about, well, how in your life could you let go of some of the control? And where can we find more space for you to create trust in the process?
There's so many good pieces to that. The first thing coming to mind is like kind of like just the freedom to be able to kind of go more and more and more out of your comfort zone. But
Yeah,
I think of like Dr. Siegel has this continuum, the rigidity and chaos. If we're feeling really rigid, to be able to scribble while we're activated in our thoughts and whatever it is that is coming up for us that feels difficult at that moment or difficult to reflect on, that gives us permission to kind of move towards that integration, towards that what
right.
Dr. Siegel talks about, that river of integration away from that rigidity.
Yeah,
And I think insights and stuff can come from that.
yeah.
That's so good. But and I know one thing, one of your many talents and skill sets is like really kind of incorporating the brain and using different hands and stuff. So the dominant hand, like what is like in terms of the brain, what is the important thing to know about what hand they use when they're doing the scribbles?
Well, there has been research done on using non-dominant hand to help with depression, and there was a woman who really claimed to have cured her depression from just doing self-portraits with her non-dominant hand.
Mm,
And I think it's activating different regions of the brain. I mean, art really activates all regions of the brain,
yeah.
but that non-dominant hand, it really is activating different parts, and even noticing like how that feels to be so right, kind of like you said, out of control, but not in a bad way, where you're letting go of that rigidity.
Oh, that's
In
so
art, we talk a lot about too, like the continuum of media. So there's more rigid art supplies, like pencils are pretty rigid, and collage. And then you go all the way to more fluid, which is like clay, where it's very
mm,
loose, and watercolor. And you can work with your clients too on like if they're having problems letting go of control and feeling like very black and white in their thinking, they might be the kind of person that you would want to encourage to try using more fluid media, to try using clay and see how it feels. And then
mm.
again, that metaphor of art and life, and how that can relate to your life outside of the therapy session.
Okay, so intentionally picking the medium that like right now, and I know we're doing this audio, so you can't see, but I'm looking at a pencil very, and you described that like as rigid, very much like you
Yes.
draw. But if we were to do paints or even, clay or even like
Yeah.
finger paints, there's a lot more. So intentionally choosing the medium, what our kind of intention is or our goal of working with
Yes.
the client
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. I know. It's really interesting.
What does your office look like? I'm so curious. I'm trying
Oh,
to
yeah.
visualize what that would look like, this range of materials and
It
how.
is. So I have a cute little office. We have what's called Officers Row. It's a like old historic buildings in Vancouver, but it's a pretty big space. And I have a huge supply of supplies. My garage now is filled with a lot because of pandemic. So I brought a lot home. But yeah, I collect stuff from Goodwill, or there's the Goodwill bins here. So I'll go and get big bags of like the marbles or the little gold or glass Mancala beads, and they'll decorate those, or pipe cleaners. So I kind of like to give like a buffet of supplies, especially to my younger clients. Like, why don't you pick out what feels right for you and see what you can create with this?
I
Yeah.
have choices.
Yes, right. And so important with trauma work, right?
Yes, and I matter. I think all of that, you can integrate all of that in there.
Yeah.
Is there, I remember hearing just a little bit about this when I was in my grad program, like the being very mindful of like certain mediums can be activating to certain
Yes,
clients. Like,
definitely.
and I know we don't want to not activate them. We're in there to get the good therapeutic work done, but some mediums can actually trigger some
Yes.
responses. Can you talk a little bit about?
Yeah, I had a bad experience as a young therapist with that, with a client where I didn't realize there was a lot of dissociation and regression. And this was a teenage client, and I gave the client clay, and it was in the wrong medium, and it became like it was like a big mess, and it was like a poopy mess, basically.
Mhm.
So my office, like she was just everywhere was like this clay and a big mess, and she really regressed. And it was actually it took some time to kind of bring her back into present day, into her body. And I really realized like the importance of creating a space, and picking the media that's going to be safe for the client. So if you do have a client that is at all, dissociative, or can regress back to a young age, you have to be careful with those more fluid media.
Okay.
So with her, we kind of stuck with collage for a while after that experience, and did pencil drawings.
So just kind of keep it a little bit more contained after that.
Yeah,
And
right.
I know, like, even if we, have all the best intentions, the best play and stuff like that can kind of happen without us even noticing it. So I think, you describing of how to handle it, that seems like, it worked out, even though it
Yeah,
wasn't necessarily ideal.
right.
Now, I remember one time, this was way back, this was like my first kind of like aha moment with it, was as a school counselor. And school counselor so different than a therapeutic setting, more of it's like, let me just help the child get back to emotional equilibrium and go back to class and learn. That's one of the functions of a school counselor. So I remember a child came in, just shut down, almost like in that dorsal state, not talking or anything, and I just had paper and pencil, not even colored pencils. And I was like, "Could I get you to draw me a picture?" I just felt like at a loss for what to do. And then she drew a picture of like her dog in a cage. They had gotten a new dog, and the dog had to be caged while they were at school and work. And I don't think that, as if I would have asked her questions, or had anything else other than art, that we would have even gotten to that space.
Right, right. Yeah, it really does act as a way to really understand what's going on beneath the surface. You're right, because had you asked, "How are you doing today?" She probably would have said, "Fine."
Mhm.
And that art
Or
gave
not
you,
talk at all.
or not talk at
Yeah,
all. Right.
just being
Yeah.
fully shut down. Now,
Yeah.
you mentioned, the Scribble drawings. I recently had an interview in the play therapy members community with Dr. Karen Freed, the one that created the online sand tray. Oh my god, I love
Oh,
it.
neat.
She's amazing. She's through the Oaklander Foundation. Such amazing things they're doing with their Just for Now cause. But one of the techniques that she showed us was doing a scribble drawing and then having the client actually pick out part of the image to be themselves, and then say what it's like to be that. It's like fascinating how many levels you can take
Oh.
it to.
Right. I love that. Yeah. Yeah. And I'll do similar things with pick out the part where that you want to expand and blow up. And let's really look at that part. Yeah. And you can ask questions like if you were a color in this, what color would you be? What would it feel like to be this part of the drawing?
Ooh,
You can get a lot of information from that. Yeah.
that's good. So that's how you would word it. Like if you were a part of this drawing or you're part of this image, which part would you be and what's it?
Mhm.
Oh, I love it. And then I think that kind of gives that safe distance to be able to explore things, maybe even project parts of yourself onto that may be kind of too much at that
Right.
point for that client to be able to experience. Now, you mentioned collage too. What are some material, like talk about a collage, like what the benefits are, how we do it, maybe a directive and what materials we may need.
Well, collage is such a safe media because it's really, it's tactile. You can tear it out, you can cut it out with scissors. Um, in EMDR, we do this in the beginning stages of resourcing the safe, peaceful state, and you can create a whole collage around imagery that represents safety for you or peace for you or calm feelings. And even just the act of thinking about that can feel really good. And then finding imagery in magazines. I even go to sometimes, like I said, the Goodwill, the bins, and I'll find really cool old picture books that they can cut up. Sometimes I'll go, there's a great store in our Portland area with all these design magazines, and I'll grab a bunch of design magazines, which have great photographs, and have them pick out imagery in there. And then you just take it, you can do glue sticks, and you can even, if you like, I do like to have Mod Podge on top, which gives it like that shiny shellac, beautiful finish. And then they have this great concrete reminder they can take with them of all these images that make them feel calm. So say they're out and they're getting irritated, they know they can just look at their imagery, they can tap into it just like we do in EMDR, and create that sense of safety within themselves, self-soothing themselves without the therapist needing to be there.
Oh, that's so good. And it does sound a little bit, I mean, for those listening that may be unfamiliar with the Safe Peaceful Place Directive, it's definitely used in other places other than EMDR, but it's one of our big staples for EMDR. It does sound kind of like how is thinking of an image or looking at an image really going to take it to a different state, like a state change and help you regulate? But it does. It really
Uh,
works.
yeah.
Especially, like, if you've been into that quiet space to create it. I literally never thought about doing it with a collage before, though. I love that
Oh,
idea.
yeah. Well, if you think about it, our mind is so good at tricking us into fear, right? Like we can think about something scary and then feel all that fear.
Yeah.
And we can do the same thing with calm and peace. Like we can think about being at the beach or walking in the forest and create that same feeling inside of our body. It might be a little bit more work initially, but I talk to clients a lot about the psychoeducation of like your brain doesn't really know the difference. If you remember it and remember it with all the five senses, you can really activate all that same good feeling within your body.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
that's fascinating, isn't it? And
Mhm.
I noticed that you're describing it as safe, peaceful place. That's something I remember when I was first trained, it was referred to as safe place. And real quickly, I noticed that worked for some people. But the word "safe" immediately their mind went to the opposite. So,
Right.
peaceful place is what I like. I love calm place. Um, it just it has a different, I think peaceful is my favorite because I think about even, like, when we're looking at the word regulation, I just, read an article. I took Lisa Dion's, synergetic play therapy intro training, and she talks about like regulation isn't the same as calm. Sometimes regulation is kind of lifts you up. So, the word peaceful or just even a place that I love seems to be good.
Yeah. I know, and I try to say state, like peaceful state. So it's not even because sometimes they're like, I don't have a place that's peaceful. There's no place outside of me that is peaceful or calm or safe. Yeah. So being really careful and mindful with those words, you're right, is so important.
Yeah, that is important. to even think about like some of the people that we're working with that have experienced trauma, like every place can be kind of contaminated. Like
Yes.
I've worked with many people that their children committed suicide or, died by suicide, death by suicide. And
Mhm.
it's just so very sad when you think about your child and you go to all these different places and you explore these places or you dream about going to these places, there's no longer a place that isn't associated with that deep trauma of losing a
Right.
child. So I love the fact that you say go to that peaceful state, and art can take you there,
That's right.
and you
Yeah.
get your images from, like, all these different places. I know a local library that we have. I'm feeling excited. I can't even talk fast as I can think. Local library has a big stack of magazines. They're like 10, 15 cents a piece. They're old, outdated, but certainly even just having clients cut out the images, that the mindfulness in itself while they're activated and they're kind of in that space of, kind of feeling and experiencing all the pieces that goes with whatever they're working on, and they're cutting, that in itself is therapeutic. But to be able to grab those images that represent something to them that is kind of new to them and put it on a collage, Mod Podge it up, seems
Yes,
like
I
that'd be a
love it.
treasure.
Well, and I also think it helps with creating intuition. Like I'll tell clients to create just a big pile of all the images that feel like a yes to you, that feel right. And then you can go through that pile and really find the ones that are a really strong yes, listening to that intuition in your gut. And that can just feel so good too in itself, of like allowing yourself the space to notice what you value and giving yourself that self-respect and that time, that
Yeah.
space. I just love art. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's incredible. I went to a workshop one time, art therapy with grief. I can't remember, it's been so many years ago, but the actual collage that I did, I had no idea what I was gonna do, and I love how you don't have to be prepared. You don't even have to have an issue in mind, but it just picked from all these different pieces. And my final piece, I was like, "Okay, I don't even know what this means." And then as I looked closer, I was like, "Oh my goodness." I had like a child playing by themselves. I had a clock took almost a whole picture. And I was like, I don't even really like clocks. I don't know why I even put it up there. I thought, I don't like clocks because I feel like I never have enough time and I don't get to play with my kids as much as I want to. And I had like toys over here and I was like, wow, this is expressing exactly what's going on for me. I feel like this clock is the center point of my life. And it was like, as
Amazing.
I was like afterwards, I was sitting in my car thinking, this is fascinating. I
Yes.
went to exactly where I needed to go, but if I was to sit down and talk to a therapist and say, "What's bothering you?" I don't even know if I would have actually chosen that
No.
because, I chose to kind of be busy and I made all these choices, but reality was feeling overwhelmed. I was feeling strapped for time, and it showed up in that collage.
Well, and I say that a lot, that I feel like art is kind of this golden road into the unconscious territory of our mind, that if we allow it space, we can learn so much about ourselves. Like you said, you probably wouldn't have talked it out like that, but the art and the imagery really brought it to the forefront and center of your mind so you could see it clearly.
Oh, yeah, I love it. And you said you get like just random materials like from the Goodwill bags and stuff and just put them out there. I think,
I
just the
do.
thought of you just have it available.
Yeah, right. I know. I have tons of old magazines and calendars I get and books. So yeah, they have a plethora of supplies to choose from. Yeah.
What I noticed, and I the word glitter is coming to mind. I don't know.
Uh-huh.
There's like I have like a lowercase t trauma when it comes to glitter. But when I think about all those, organization is a
Yeah.
big deal. I'm not the best at organization, to be completely honest. I think a lot of us that are creative, it's a struggle. How do you keep all your stuff organized in your office?
Yeah, good question. Well, I have little bins, like I have all my paint supplies in one plastic bin, all my clay in a little bin, and then I put little labels on it so that I know where to put it back. I know when I used to work in a school too, we would have kids kind of clean up after themselves, but because of the short sessions, I only have 15-minute sessions. So I do all the cleanup and I just have to have it quickly going back into the right bins so that I can see the next client. But
Yes.
yeah, organization is a big deal with art therapists. I think we could just have a whole like meeting on that.
Yeah, you're quickly like whoosh, 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 trying to get it
Mhm.
all back in place.
Right.
I watched a video one time with Pam Dyson, like when I was in grad school. Like she has like some really good videos on Pinterest and YouTube. Lots of great direction. But one of the things I learned from her was um, you can get the big things of paint, but you don't give those big things of paint to a child. I learned that the hard way. Like you have a big thing of paint, they will pump out all that paint, and that will be the activity that they have going. So one of the tips she had was get like the little glue bottles that where you could pour glue or little, and you just put in a little bit, and then you give
Oh
them that little
yeah.
bit.
I
Yeah,
have these little tiny mason jars that have the lid. I just take the lid off. I fill those up. Yep, give them to the kids.
oh,
Yeah.
that's great. That way that doesn't, because the squeezing, which I do think is therapeutic, but you get this little tube of paint and then it's like gone after the kid.
And I use puffy paints a lot with kids because they are so fun to squeeze out, but they go fast and they're kind of expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's some tricks of the trade that you can
Yeah.
learn. All
Yeah.
right. So we are almost out of time, but I want to make sure that people know where to go to learn more from you, maybe get some of the therapy tools,
Oh, yeah.
or maybe if they want the colorful place, mindful story and art for kids book, or just want to get any consultation from me. I think you have so much to offer that
Oh,
where could people find you?
so a couple of places. One is for the book now. We have a website called breatheartcalm.com. And that even has a great workbook for free that's all about using art and creativity to find calm within. It's got 23 pages and it's got a bunch of my art and a bunch of information, which could be fun. And then they can find me on my clinical practice. It's just my name, jocelynfitzgerald.com.
Okay.
And then for the Etsy shop, the little downloads, it's colorful therapy tools.
Oh, that's great. And
Yeah.
I know for those of you listening, like to even imagine it just through our words is hard. Definitely go to these places. I literally, when I found Jocelyn on Etsy, I was like, wow, it's truly beautiful. But there's tools like the window of tolerance. Can you just
Oh,
briefly
yeah.
describe some
That
of the
one is one of
things?
my favorites.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's Dan Siegel's work, right? But it has the three windows. So the top, well, where we want to hang out the most is in that middle window where we make good, calm decisions. But then the top window is the hyperarousal. So that's the anxiety, fight, flight. And then the bottom window is the hypoarousal, where we dissociate and check out. But I created this window of tolerance to represent nature because my clients were kind of having a hard time understanding it. They love the concept, but I thought maybe there's an easier way with nature to explain it.
Yeah.
So for the top window, the hyperarousal, I created like a storm. There's thunder and lightning, there's fire, there's wind, there's a tornado. And that's kind of how I vision the hyperarousal, like when we're in that anxious,
It's like too
angry,
much,
too
overactivated.
much.
Yeah.
Yes. The middle window, I put it's like a peaceful camping site. So there's like a hammock and some tents and some mountains, and there's a little trail. And it just feels calm and organized. And then the bottom one is the hypoarousal with the dissociation and the freeze state. And that one I did caves and I did snowflakes to represent the being cold and just kind of going within.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one has gotten so much love and attention. It's been
Yeah.
really fun.
Even just you saying that, describing that, I felt sense. But I've been using it with my adult clients, just sharing the screen in the virtual therapy
Oh,
sessions.
God.
And just the visual is like incredible. And I think it was you that put somewhere on there about Peter Prune's work.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So I Googled because I literally I was like looking at everything you had. I was like, I want to get all of this
Yes.
because it's just such a great addition to my work, to where
Uh-huh.
like art can definitely go more than what I can create. I'm not necessarily, not put myself down, but I don't quite have that skill set that you
Uh-huh.
have. You're showing there. But the Peter Prune, I went in search for his stuff, and he has an amazing packet, client handouts and therapist resources for trauma, EMDR, and general psychotherapy. I've been using his and yours in my virtual sessions. It's just
Oh, I
the
love
best.
hearing that. Yeah, he's a good friend. I know his workbook really inspired a lot of my art.
Really.
So, yeah, definitely check out his work too. He's so organized.
Yeah, yeah, it's really inspirational. I talked to him
Yeah.
a little bit back and forth on the email. We had like a struggle of
Fun.
like trying to get the handout to me. But when I got it, here I am in the with the new session. I was like, oh, I'm going to share my screen. See this right here. This
Yes.
is
Yeah. Yeah.
it's so
That's
good.
so
So I want
great.
to shout out. I'll put the links that you mentioned below
Okay.
in the show notes. When I say below this video, we're in audio, but in the show notes at playtherapycommunity.com, as well as a link to Peter's handouts as well on Etsy or his
Oh,
blog.
great. Yeah. Wonderful.
All right. Well, thank you, Jocelyn. It's been
Yes.
an honor to get to know
Thank
you.
you.
And we did, before we hit record on this, we were talking about doing another video for the play therapy members community, doing a little training on some art therapy directives, which I'm super
Yeah.
excited about.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe we could even do collage.
Yeah.
Do
Yes.
some
Oh, that
collage
sounds
activity.
good.
Yeah.
Gosh, I
Let's
wish
do
that
that.
was right now. All right.
Yeah.
All right. You take care. I'll catch you
You
later.
too.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode with Jocelyn and I. If you would like to check out the show notes, you can find those at www.playtherapycommunity.com. And if you're interested in any of my trainings or consultation for EMDR or anything like that, definitely feel free to visit www.jackieflynnconsulting.com. Okay, until next time, take care.